When a stranger grabbed my arm and pulled me back from that crosswalk, I had no idea he was saving me from more than just traffic. What happened next exposed a betrayal so calculated, so cruel, that I spent the next 4 months dismantling everything I'd built for the people who orchestrated it. By spring, they'd lost their home, their reputation, and any claim to my forgiveness. Sometimes the traps we avoid reveal the ones we've been living in all along. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The November rain had turned Portland's streets into mirrors, reflecting the gray sky and the blur of umbrellas rushing past. I stood at the corner of Southwest Broadway and Morrison, waiting for the walk signal like I'd done 1,000 times before. My hands were shoved deep in my jacket pockets, my mind already at the bank across the street where I needed to transfer this month's payment to Tyler and Vanessa. $3,200. Same as last month. Same as the 47 months before that. The signal changed. White figure glowing against the red hand. I stepped off the curb. A hand clamped around my forearm with surprising strength, yanking me backwards so hard I stumbled. Stop! It's a trap. I spun around to face a man I'd never seen before. Asian, maybe 40, wearing a rain-soaked jacket and an expression of pure alarm. He was pointing at something, his other hand still gripping my arm. "What are you talking about?" I started to say, but then I heard it. The squeal of tires on wet pavement. A delivery truck came barreling through the red light, exactly where I would have been standing if this stranger hadn't pulled me back. The driver wasn't even looking at the road. His head was down, probably checking his phone, completely oblivious to the crosswalk he'd just blown through. My heart hammered against my ribs. The truck disappeared down Morrison Street, leaving only the smell of exhaust and burnt rubber hanging in the damp air. The stranger released my arm, his face pale. "You okay?" I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. Around us, other pedestrians had frozen, a few pulling out their phones to presumably report what they'd witnessed. The whole thing had happened in maybe 3 seconds, but my legs felt like water. "I'm Marcus," the stranger said, his breathing still heavy. "Marcus Chen. I saw him coming and you were just stepping out and I couldn't let you walk into that." "Walter Hayes," I managed, extending a shaky hand. "Walt. Thank you. I think you just saved my life." We stood there for a moment as the rain picked up, both of us processing what had almost happened. The walk signal cycled back to the red hand. People flowed around us like we were rocks in a stream. "Can I buy you a coffee?" I asked. "It's the least I can do." Marcus checked his watch, then nodded. Yeah, I could use something warm right now." We ended up at the Stumptown Coffee 2 blocks away, sitting by the window with steaming cups between us. My hands were still trembling slightly as I wrapped them around the ceramic mug. The warmth helped. "That's the second time this month I've seen someone almost get hit at that intersection," Marcus said. "The city needs to do something about the timing on those lights." I was distracted, I admitted. Had something on my mind. Marcus smiled sympathetically. "Don't we all? What's got you so preoccupied you nearly walked into traffic?" The question was casual, the kind strangers ask when they're making small talk, but something about the near-death experience had loosened something in me. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was the fact that this man had literally saved my life and owed me nothing, expected nothing. Whatever the reason, I found myself talking. I was on my way to transfer money to my grandson and his wife. "Monthly payment I make toward their condo." "That's generous of you," Marcus said. I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Is it? I've been doing it for 4 years now. Over $200,000 total when you count the down payment and everything else. And last week, they told me I wouldn't be welcome at Thanksgiving dinner." Marcus's eyebrows rose. He set down his coffee cup. "They said what?" I stared into my own cup, watching the steam curl upward. "Tyler called me 3 days ago. Said Vanessa's parents were coming for Thanksgiving, and they'd prefer a more intimate gathering. Just immediate family," he said. Like I'm not immediate family. Like 4 years of keeping them afloat doesn't count for anything. The words poured out then, everything I'd been holding inside for days. How Tyler had married Vanessa 2 years out of college. How they'd wanted to live in the Pearl District, the expensive part of Portland where young professionals showed off their success to each other. How the down payment had wiped out half of what Dorothy and I had saved during 40 years of marriage. How the monthly payments had come from refinancing my house in Selwood, the house Dorothy and I had bought when we were newlyweds. She passed 6 years ago, I said quietly. Dorothy. Cancer. She never got to see me drain our retirement fund for a grandson who apparently thinks I'm too embarrassing to have at holiday dinners. Marcus listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious as the story unfolded. When I finally ran out of words, he leaned back in his chair. What did Tyler say when you asked him why? I didn't ask. I just said okay and hung up. What was I supposed to say? Beg him to let me sit at a table I paid for? You could have said no to the payment this month. The thought had occurred to me, of course it had. But saying it out loud to a stranger made it feel real, possible, like permission I'd been waiting for someone to give me. They're counting on that money, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Their mortgage payment is due on the 15th. If I don't transfer it, they'll be late. And? Marcus's tone wasn't unkind, just direct. You almost died 5 minutes ago walking across the street to give money to people who don't want you at their Thanksgiving table. Doesn't that seem backwards to you? I had no answer for that. Outside the coffee shop window, Portland went about its business. People rushed past with shopping bags and briefcases, everyone heading somewhere they were wanted, somewhere they belonged. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a text from Vanessa. Hey Walt. Just confirming you'll have the transfer done by Friday. We've got the mortgage payment scheduled and don't want any hiccups. Thanks. Followed by a smiley face emoji. Not even a question. Just an assumption that I'd comply, that I'd continue being their personal bank while they excluded me from their lives. Marcus didn't need to see the screen to understand what the message said. My face must have told him everything. You know what I think? Marcus said, finishing his coffee. I think that truck missing you wasn't the only trap you avoided today. Sometimes we get so used to walking into things that hurt us, we don't even see them coming anymore. He stood up, pulling on his jacket. I should get going. But Walt, do yourself a favor. Before you make that transfer, ask yourself if you're helping them or if you're just teaching them that your dignity has a price tag. He handed me a business card. Marcus Chen, insurance investigator. If you ever need someone to talk to who's seen their share of people being taken advantage of, give me a call. After he left, I sat alone with my empty coffee cup and my phone. Vanessa's text still glowed on the screen. That smiley face seemed to mock me now, a casual dismissal of everything I'd sacrificed. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining. I opened my banking app and stared at the scheduled transfer. $3,200, set to process in 2 days. My finger hovered over the cancel button. 4 years of payments. 4 years of telling myself I was being a good grandfather, a supportive family member. 4 years of eating cheaper groceries and putting off home repairs so Tyler and Vanessa could live in their Pearl District condo with its floor-to-ceiling windows and rooftop deck. 4 years of watching my savings evaporate while they posted photos on social media of expensive restaurants and weekend trips to the coast. And now I wasn't even good enough for Thanksgiving dinner. I thought about Marcus's words. Teaching them that your dignity has a price tag. Is that what I'd been doing? Paying for the privilege of being tolerated, accepted, included in a family I'd helped create? My thumb moved to the cancel button, then stopped. Not yet. Not without understanding exactly why Tyler had excluded me. Not without hearing the truth from his own mouth instead of his careful, diplomatic phone voice that had said just immediate family like those words didn't cut deeper than any insult. I pocketed my phone and stood up. The bank could wait. I had a different destination now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Pearl District was only a 15-minute drive from here. It was time to have a conversation that was 4 years overdue, one where I asked questions instead of just writing checks. As I walked back out into the gray Portland afternoon, I thought about traps. The obvious ones that come at you like trucks running red lights. And the subtle ones you walk into willingly, month after month, year after year, because you've convinced yourself that's what love requires. Maybe Marcus had saved me from more than just traffic today. Maybe he'd given me permission to finally step back and look at the pattern I'd been walking into, over and over, without ever questioning whether the people on the other side actually wanted me there or just wanted what I could provide. The drive to the Pearl District took me through the heart of downtown Portland, past Powell's Books and the food cart pods, through neighborhoods that transformed block by block from working class to wealthy. By the time I pulled up outside Tyler and Vanessa's building, the sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting weak light on the modern glass facade. I sat in my truck for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Through the lobby windows, I could see the doorman at his station, the marble floors, the abstract art hanging on the walls. This building had a gym and a concierge service. This building had valet parking and a rooftop garden. This building cost more per month than I'd earned in a year when I was Tyler's age. And I'd helped pay for their place in it. I got out of the truck and walked through the automatic doors, past the doorman who nodded politely, into the elevator that whisked me silently to the 8th floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, smelling faintly of expensive cleaning products and other people's money. I knocked on Unit 812. Firm, steady, the knock of a man who had questions that deserved answers. Tyler opened the door in sweatpants and a college hoodie, clearly not expecting visitors. His face went through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, confusion, and something that might have been guilt. "Dad," he said. "Walt. What are you doing here?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "We need to talk, Tyler. And this time, I want the truth." Tyler stepped back from the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to something resembling caution. "Come in, I guess." The condo was exactly as I remembered it from my last visit 3 months ago. Sleek furniture that looked expensive but uncomfortable. Abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of downtown Portland that Tyler and Vanessa loved to photograph for their social media accounts. Everything spotless, everything coordinated, everything screaming look at how successful we are. Vanessa emerged from the bedroom, her yoga pants and designer athleisure top probably worth more than I spent on clothes in a year. Her face registered shock, then something harder to read. "Walt," she said, her voice tight. "This is unexpected." I stayed standing near the door, not bothering to remove my jacket. "I won't take much of your time. I just have one question, and I'd appreciate an honest answer." Tyler exchanged a glance with Vanessa. She gave a small nod, like they were communicating in a language I wasn't privy to. "Okay," Tyler said slowly. "What's the question?" I looked at my grandson, this young man I'd held as a baby, whose college application essays I'd helped edit, whose wedding I'd paid for when his parents couldn't afford it. Why am I not welcome at Thanksgiving dinner? The silence stretched between us like a physical thing. Outside the windows, Portland sprawled beneath gray skies. Inside this expensive box in the sky, 3 people stood in a triangle of discomfort. "Dad," Tyler started. "Don't call me that." My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. "Your father is in Seattle with his new family. I'm your grandfather. Use my name or call me what you always have. But don't use that word to try and soften whatever you're about to say." Tyler flinched. "Walt, it's complicated." "Uncomplicated." Vanessa crossed her arms. "If you want honesty, fine. My parents don't feel comfortable with you there. They think you're too rough around the edges for the kind of dinner we're planning." "Too rough around the edges." I repeated the words slowly, tasting their meaning. "What does that mean exactly?" She sighed like I was being deliberately obtuse. You're a retired electrician, Walt. My father is a corporate attorney. My mother invests in commercial real estate. They're used to a certain level of conversation, a certain type of guest. No offense, but you and they don't exactly have much in common. So this is about class. About education. About me not being sophisticated enough for the Caldwells. Tyler held up his hands. It's not like that. It's just that Vanessa's parents have very specific expectations for holidays. They're traditional people. They like things a certain way. Traditional people who summer in Napa and winter in Scottsdale, I said. Traditional people who think a man who worked with his hands for 40 years isn't worthy of sitting at their table. Traditional people whose daughter you married, whose lifestyle you've been funding with my money. That's not fair, Vanessa snapped. We never asked you to help us with the condo. I laughed then, a sound that held no warmth. You didn't ask? Tyler called me 4 years ago saying you'd found the perfect place but couldn't afford the down payment. He said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He said you'd never ask for help again if I could just do this one thing. We were young, Tyler said defensively. We didn't understand how expensive the city was. So I gave you $55,000. I took out a second mortgage on the house your grandmother and I bought in 1978. The house she died in. And when you called 6 months later saying you couldn't make the monthly payments, I started sending $3,200 every month. For 4 years, Tyler. 4 years. Vanessa's face had gone pale. We didn't know it was coming from a second mortgage. You never said anything. Would it have mattered? I asked. Would you have said no thank you, we'll figure it out ourselves? Or would you have taken the money anyway and just felt slightly guilty about it? Neither of them answered. Tyler stared at the floor. Vanessa picked at her manicured nails. I walked further into the living room, looking around at everything my sacrifice had purchased. The marble countertops in the kitchen. The smart home system that controlled the lights and temperature. The designer couch that no one ever sat on because it was too uncomfortable. You know what I did this afternoon? I almost got hit by a truck. A complete stranger grabbed me and pulled me back from the crosswalk, saved my life. And you know where I was going? To the bank. To transfer this month's payment to you. Because that's what I do. Every month, without fail, whether I can afford groceries or not. Whether my roof is leaking or not. Whether I'm invited to Thanksgiving or not. Walt, Tyler's voice was small. We didn't mean to make you feel unappreciated. But you did. You made me feel like an ATM. Like a service you subscribe to that you can turn off when it's no longer convenient. And the worst part is that I let you. I let you treat me like my only value was the checks I could write. Vanessa straightened her shoulders, her defensive walls going up. Look, we are grateful for your help. But you can't use that generosity as leverage to force your way into events where you're not wanted. My parents specifically asked for an intimate family dinner. Just us and them. That's their right. And it's my right to stop funding a lifestyle for people who think I'm too rough around the edges to breathe the same air as Martin and Diane Caldwell. Tyler's head snapped up. What are you saying? I'm saying that the automatic transfer I've been making every month is ending. After 4 years and over $200,000, I'm done subsidizing your Pearl District fantasy. Vanessa's face flushed red. You can't do that. We have the mortgage payment due next week. We budget around that money. Then I suggest you adjust your budget. Sell the condo if you have to. Move somewhere you can actually afford. Do what every other young couple does and live within your means. This is ridiculous, Vanessa said, her voice rising. You're throwing a tantrum because you can't come to one dinner. This is emotional blackmail. No, I said quietly. Emotional blackmail is what you've been doing to me for 4 years. Making me feel like if I stopped giving you money, I'd lose my only connection to my grandson. Making me believe that my value to this family was measured in wire transfers and mortgage payments. This is me finally realizing that I deserve better than that. Tyler stepped forward, his face crumpling. Walt, please. Don't do this. We can work something out. Maybe we can have you over for dinner next week, just the three of us. So I can earn back your affection? So I can prove I'm worthy of your time? I shook my head. Tyler, when your grandmother was dying, she made me promise that I'd always be there for you. That I'd help you build a good life. I thought that meant giving you money. I thought that meant making sure you never struggled the way we did. But I was wrong. All I did was teach you that love comes with a price tag and that family is conditional. That's not true, Tyler protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Then prove it. Show me that I matter to you for reasons that have nothing to do with my bank account. Show me that you actually want me in your life, not just my financial support. We do want you in our life, Vanessa said, but her tone suggested otherwise. You're just being dramatic about this whole thing. My parents didn't mean anything personal by wanting a small dinner. They meant exactly what they said, I replied. That I'm not good enough. That a retired electrician from Selwood doesn't belong at a table with corporate lawyers and real estate investors. And you both agreed with them. That's the part that hurts the most. Not that the Caldwells look down on me, but that you do too. I turned toward the door, my hand on the handle. The monthly transfers stop immediately. If you need help, you'll have to earn it by treating me like family instead of a resource to be exploited. And Tyler, when you're ready to have a real relationship with me, one based on respect instead of money, you know where to find me. Wait, Tyler called out. What about Thanksgiving? Can we at least talk about it? I looked back at him, this grandson I'd loved and supported and apparently enabled. There's nothing to talk about. Enjoy your intimate family dinner with the Caldwells. I'm sure it'll be everything you hoped for. I walked out of the condo and closed the door behind me, cutting off whatever Tyler was about to say. The hallway was silent except for the hum of the building's ventilation system. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or weakness. From the sheer relief of finally saying what needed to be said. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked older than I remembered, more tired. For years of carrying a burden I'd volunteered for had left its mark. But there was something else in my expression too. Something I hadn't seen in a long time. Self-respect. The doorman nodded as I passed through the lobby. Outside, the late afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, casting long shadows across the Pearl District's pristine streets. I climbed into my truck and sat there for a moment, letting the enormity of what I'd just done sink in. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. You're making a huge mistake. We'll lose the condo because of your pride. I typed back, you'll lose the condo because you bought something you couldn't afford and expected someone else to pay for it indefinitely. That's not my pride. That's your poor planning. I turned off my phone before she could respond and started the engine. The drive back to Selwood felt different somehow, lighter. The neighborhoods passing by my windows, the river reflecting the breaking sunlight, the familiar streets of my own area welcoming me home. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed the things I'd been ignoring for months. The sagging gutter that needed repair. The fence that needed painting. The garden Dorothy had loved that had become overgrown because I couldn't afford to maintain it while sending thousands to the Pearl District every month. Inside my house, the quiet felt different than it had this morning. Not empty, but peaceful. I made myself dinner, actual food instead of the cheap pasta I'd been living on. I poured a glass of wine from a bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tonight felt special enough. As I sat at my kitchen table eating real food and drinking decent wine, I thought about Marcus Chen and his business card sitting in my wallet. An insurance investigator who'd seen his share of people being taken advantage of. Maybe I'd call him tomorrow, thank him properly for saving my life in more ways than he'd realized. My landline rang. I let it go to voicemail. Tyler's voice filled the kitchen, pleading and desperate. Walt, please pick up. Vanessa's upset. Can we please just talk about this rationally? I deleted the message without listening to the rest. There was nothing left to discuss. I'd said everything that needed saying. Now it was their turn to figure out how to live without using me as a crutch. The evening settled around me like a comfortable blanket. Outside my window, my neighbors were coming home from work, ordinary people living ordinary lives without the drama of ungrateful grandchildren and entitled in-laws. I envied their simplicity even as I appreciated my newfound freedom. Tomorrow I would call the bank and officially cancel the automatic transfer. Tomorrow I would start looking into fixing my gutters and painting my fence. Tomorrow I would begin rebuilding the life I'd put on hold for 4 years. But tonight, I would sit in my paid-off house in my working-class neighborhood and remember that Dorothy had loved me not for what I could provide, but for who I was. And that was worth more than all the Pearl District condos in Portland. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and scrolled through them while the sunrise painted my walls orange and gold. Tyler, Vanessa, even a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Diane Caldwell herself. All of them variations on the same theme. How could I be so selfish, so cruel, so unreasonable? The most interesting message came from Martin Caldwell at 6:47 in the morning. Mr. Hayes, this is Martin Caldwell, Vanessa's father. I understand there's been some tension regarding the holiday arrangements. I'd like to speak with you man-to-man about finding a resolution. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Man-to-man. Like we were equals negotiating a business deal instead of what this really was. A wealthy attorney trying to manage the fallout from his daughter's poor financial planning and worse interpersonal skills. I deleted all the messages without responding and opened my laptop. Time to make everything official. The bank's website loaded slowly on my ancient computer, another thing I'd put off upgrading because every spare dollar had gone elsewhere. I navigated to automatic payments and found the transfer to Tyler and Vanessa's mortgage company. For years of uninterrupted payments stretching back to December 2019. $153,600, not counting the down payment. My cursor hovered over the cancel button. This was it. The moment where I either continued enabling them or finally drew a line that actually meant something. I thought about Dorothy, about what she would say if she could see me now. She'd always been the strong one, the one who didn't tolerate disrespect from anyone. When Tyler's parents had tried to exclude us from his high school graduation because we were just the grandparents, Dorothy had shown up anyway and sat in the front row. Nobody tells me I can't watch my grandson succeed, she'd said. I clicked cancel. The screen asked me to confirm. Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment? I clicked yes. The confirmation message appeared. Your automatic payment has been canceled. Just like that. For years of financial support ending with 2 mouse clicks. I sat back in my chair, waiting for the guilt to arrive, for the voice in my head that would tell me I was being petty and vindictive. Instead, I felt calm. Clear-headed. Free. My phone rang. Martin Caldwell's number. I answered on the 3rd ring. Mr. Hayes, thank you for taking my call. Martin's voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of someone used to getting their way through charm and implied authority. I understand you've made some hasty decisions regarding Tyler and Vanessa's living situation. I made a decision about my own finances, I corrected. Nothing hasty about it. I've been thinking about this for quite some time. A pause. I could almost hear him recalculating his approach. Mr. Hayes, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here. My wife and I never intended to exclude you from Thanksgiving. We simply thought a smaller gathering would be more intimate, more meaningful. More meaningful without the retired electrician from Selwood mucking up your sophisticated conversation. Another pause, longer this time. I can see Vanessa may have communicated our preferences poorly. Let me be direct with you. You're clearly a man who appreciates straight talk. We're willing to extend an invitation to you for Thanksgiving dinner if that would resolve this financial dispute. Financial dispute. Like I was a creditor threatening to foreclose rather than a grandfather who'd been treated like hired help. And there it was. The real reason for his call. Not concern for Tyler or Vanessa, but concern for their mortgage payment. I'm not interested in buying my way onto your guest list, Mr. Caldwell. And this isn't a dispute. It's a decision I should have made years ago. His tone shifted, the charm evaporating. Mr. Hayes, I don't think you understand the position you're putting these young people in. They've built a life based on certain expectations. You can't just pull the rug out from under them without warning. I've been warning them for 4 years, I said. Every time I sent money I couldn't afford. Every time I refinanced my house or skipped repairs or ate cheaper food so they could live in the Pearl District. They chose not to hear those warnings because it was convenient to ignore them. This is incredibly selfish behavior from someone your age. You're supposed to be helping the younger generation, not sabotaging them out of spite. I'm 68 years old, Mr. Caldwell. I worked as an electrician for 42 years. My wife died of cancer 6 years ago after we'd spent our savings on her treatment. I've given your daughter and my grandson over $200,000 while you and your wife summered in Napa Valley. Don't lecture me about helping the younger generation when you've done nothing but look down on me for not being sophisticated enough for your standards. Silence on the other end. When Martin spoke again, his voice had gone cold. You're making a serious mistake. I have connections throughout Portland's business community. One word from me could make things very difficult for you. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You can't treat people this way and expect no consequences. Especially when those people have resources you don't. I almost laughed. Mr. Caldwell, I'm a retired electrician living in a paid-off house in Selwood. What exactly are you going to do to me? Ruin my non-existent social standing? Damage my non-existent business relationships? I don't need your world, and I certainly don't need your approval. We'll see about that, he said, and hung up. I set the phone down and looked around my kitchen. The morning light was streaming through the windows Dorothy had insisted we install during our last renovation. Everything in this house held memories of her. The table where we'd eaten breakfast for 30 years. The chair where she'd sat reading mysteries on rainy afternoons. The window over the sink where she'd watched birds at the feeder. She would have been proud of me for standing up to Martin Caldwell. She would have told me I should have done it 3 years ago. But she also would have understood why it took me so long. When you love someone, you want to believe the best about them. You want to think that your sacrifice means something, that it's building connection rather than dependence. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Diane Caldwell. What you're doing is cruel and unusual. These are our children we're talking about. Have you no shame? I typed back a response. When your daughter told me I was too rough around the edges for your Thanksgiving table, did you step in and correct her? When she said I didn't have enough in common with you to warrant an invitation, did you disagree? Shame is something you might want to examine in your own family before pointing it at mine. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response came. The day stretched ahead of me with unusual emptiness. No errands to run for Tyler and Vanessa. No emergency calls asking me to cover their utilities or car payment or some other expense that had caught them by surprise. Just my own life, my own schedule, my own priorities. I called Marcus Chen. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful. Walt, good to hear from you. How are you feeling after yesterday? Better than I expected, I said. Listen, I wanted to properly thank you for pulling me back from that crosswalk. And for the advice afterward. You were right about the traps I'd been walking into. I'm glad you're okay. That was too close for comfort. I told him about the confrontation with Tyler and Vanessa, about canceling the payments, about Martin Caldwell's threatening phone call. Marcus listened without interrupting, the way good listeners do. Sounds like you stirred up a hornet's nest, he said when I finished. How do you feel about it? Honestly? Relieved. Scared. Guilty. Free. All of it at once. That's normal. When you stop enabling people who've become dependent on your generosity, they don't usually thank you for it. They panic. And when people panic, they lash out. Martin Caldwell mentioned having connections. Implied he could make things difficult for me. Marcus made a thoughtful sound. As an insurance investigator, I've dealt with my share of wealthy people making threats. Usually it's hot air. But you might want to be prepared for some kind of retaliation. People like that don't like being told no, especially by people they consider beneath them. What kind of retaliation? Hard to say. Could be nothing. Could be something public, designed to embarrass you or damage your reputation. They might try to control the narrative, make themselves look like victims. How would they do that? Social media. Local news if they have those kinds of connections. Make you out to be the villain who abandoned his struggling grandson. Play up the generational angle, old person pulling the ladder up behind them, that kind of thing. I hadn't considered that possibility, but it made sense. Martin was a corporate attorney. Diane was in real estate. These were people who understood the value of reputation, who knew how to manipulate public opinion. What should I do? Document everything, Marcus said. Keep records of all the payments you've made. Screenshot any text messages or emails where they've been disrespectful or dismissive. If they go public with their version of events, you want to be able to counter with facts. That seems excessive. Maybe. But in my line of work, I've learned that people will surprise you with how low they'll go when money's involved. Better to have documentation you don't need than need documentation you don't have. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. His warning lingered in my mind as I spent the rest of the day doing ordinary things. Grocery shopping without checking prices obsessively. Buying the good coffee instead of the store brand. Looking at paint samples for my kitchen, something I'd been putting off for 6 years. That evening, my sister Ruth called from Eugene. "Walt, what the hell is going on? Tyler's been calling me all day saying you've abandoned him." I gave her the full story, everything from the Thanksgiving exclusion to the confrontation to Martin's threats. Ruth had never liked Vanessa, had warned me years ago that the girl was trouble. She listened with the grim satisfaction of someone whose suspicions had been confirmed. "About damn time you stood up for yourself," she said. "Dorothy would have kicked your ass for waiting this long." "I know. So what now? You think they'll come around?" "I don't know. Maybe. But not until they've exhausted every other option. Right now they're in crisis mode, trying to figure out how to make their mortgage payment. Once that panic subsides, maybe they'll be ready to have a real conversation. And if they don't? Then I'll have learned something important about who Tyler has become. And I'll move forward accordingly." After we hung up, I made myself dinner and ate it slowly, savoring each bite. The house was quiet but not lonely. Outside my window, the November darkness had settled over Selwood. Lights glowed in neighboring windows. Normal people living normal lives. My phone stayed mercifully silent through dinner and into the evening. I half expected another barrage of calls, but apparently they'd given up for the day. Or they were regrouping, planning their next move. I thought about Marcus's warning about retaliation. About Martin's connections and resources. About the possibility that they might try to paint me as the villain in this story. Part of me wanted to reach out, to smooth things over, to go back to the familiar pattern of giving and appeasing. But a stronger part remembered standing at that crosswalk, remembered the stranger's hand pulling me back, remembered his words about traps you walk into so often you stop seeing them coming. I wasn't going to walk into this one anymore. Whatever came next, I would face it standing up for myself rather than bending over backward for people who saw me as nothing more than a funding source. The night settled around me, peaceful and mine. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, I was free. The article appeared on the Willamette Week website 3 days later. I was drinking my morning coffee when Ruth called, her voice tight with anger. "Have you seen the internet today?" she asked without preamble. "No, why?" "Check the Willamette Week. Local interest section. You're going to want to sit down first." I opened my laptop with a growing sense of dread. The headline loaded slowly on my screen. Local grandfather abandons family during financial crisis, a Thanksgiving story gone wrong. My photograph stared back at me. Not a recent one, but an old picture from Tyler's wedding 5 years ago, cropped to show just me looking stern and uncomfortable in my ill-fitting rental tux. Below it, a story that turned my stomach. Tyler Hayes, 28, never expected his grandfather would abandon his family during their time of need. After years of accepting financial support from Walter Hayes, 68, Tyler and his wife Vanessa now face foreclosure on their Portland home after the elder Hayes abruptly cut off all assistance without warning or explanation. The timing couldn't be worse. With Thanksgiving approaching and mounting debts, the young couple describes feeling betrayed and confused by Hayes' sudden withdrawal. "He just stopped responding to our calls," Tyler Hayes told the Willamette Week. "One day he was helping us, promising he'd always be there, and the next day he completely cut us off. We don't understand what we did wrong." The article continued with quotes I recognized as carefully edited versions of conversations we'd had. References to my generosity over the years, painted now as a pattern of control that I'd weaponized the moment they displeased me. Vanessa described me as emotionally unstable and prone to dramatic overreactions. Tyler suggested I might be experiencing age-related cognitive decline that was affecting my judgment and decision-making. Martin Caldwell weighed in as a concerned family member. "It's heartbreaking to watch an elderly man damage his relationships with his only family over what appears to be a minor misunderstanding about holiday plans. We've tried to reach out, to mediate, but Mr. Hayes refuses all communication. At this point, we're concerned about his mental health and his ability to make sound decisions." Mental health. Cognitive decline. Emotional instability. Every phrase carefully chosen to paint me as an irrational old man having some kind of breakdown rather than someone who'd simply stopped being a doormat. The comments section was already filling up. Most people sided with Tyler and Vanessa, expressing sympathy for the young couple being abandoned by their cruel grandfather. A few questioned why they couldn't afford their own mortgage, but those comments were quickly shouted down by others insisting that intergenerational support was normal and my withdrawal was elder abuse in reverse. I read the article 3 times, my coffee going cold beside me. This was what Marcus had warned me about. The narrative being controlled, the story being shaped to make me the villain. And it was working. The article had been shared 47 times already, each share accompanied by comments about heartless old people and the selfishness of the boomer generation. My phone started ringing. Unknown numbers, probably reporters looking for comment. I let them all go to voicemail. Ruth called back. "Walt, you need to respond to this. You can't let them control the story like this." What am I supposed to say? I was tired suddenly, bone-deep tired. That my grandson and his wife are lying. That I have receipts proving everything. That makes me look petty and vindictive. It makes you look truthful. Walt, they're destroying your reputation. You have to fight back. Maybe I don't care about my reputation anymore. Maybe I'm tired of fighting. Dorothy would have fought. She wouldn't have let them get away with this. The mention of my wife stung because Ruth was right. Dorothy would have marched down to the Willamette Week offices with bank statements and mortgage documents and demanded a retraction. She would have made so much noise they'd have no choice but to print the truth. But Dorothy was gone, and I was tired, and the idea of prolonging this battle made me want to crawl back into bed and sleep until spring. I spent the rest of the morning ignoring phone calls and deleting voicemails from reporters. By noon, the article had been picked up by the Oregonian. By evening, it was on the local TV news. I watched myself be described as a troubled elderly man who'd abandoned his family in their time of need. They used the same photo from the Willamette Week, the one where I looked angry and unapproachable. Marcus called just after 6. I saw the article. "I'm sorry, Walt. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. They made me sound insane. They made you sound like you're having a breakdown. It's a classic tactic. Discredit the person rather than address the actual issues. Have you thought about responding? What's the point? Even if I show them the bank records, even if I prove I gave them $200,000, it won't matter. They'll just say I'm using my generosity as a weapon. That I'm trying to buy love and throwing a tantrum when it didn't work. You might be right. But silence can be interpreted as guilt. People might assume you have no defense. Let them assume what they want. I'm done caring what strangers think of me. But Marcus didn't let it drop. What about the people who know you? Your neighbors, your friends, people in your community. Don't they deserve to hear your side? He had a point. I thought about my neighbor Ed, who'd probably read the article by now. My electrician friends from the union, who might be wondering if I'd really lost my mind. Ruth's friends who knew me, who'd be confused by the disconnect between the person they knew and the person Tyler and Martin had created. What would responding even look like? I asked. A letter to the editor maybe. A Facebook post with documentation. Something that lays out the facts without being emotional or defensive. Just the numbers, the timeline, what actually happened. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. These stories have a shelf life. Respond while people are still paying attention or the narrative becomes permanent. After he hung up, I sat in my darkening living room and thought about narratives. About the story Tyler and Vanessa were telling versus the story I'd lived. About truth and perception and whether the difference even mattered anymore. My doorbell rang. I considered not answering, but persistence won out. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with a camera bag and a notebook. Reporter. I opened the door a crack. Mr. Hayes, I'm Jennifer Wu from KGW News. I was wondering if you'd like to comment on the article in the Willamette Week. No comment. I understand you're upset, but don't you think your grandson and his wife deserve to hear your side of the story? They know my side of the story. They lived it. Her pen was poised over her notebook. Can you at least confirm whether you did cut off financial support to Tyler Hayes? I can confirm that I stopped giving money to adults who treated me with disrespect while demanding I fund their lifestyle. Is that enough of a quote for you? She blinked, surprised by the directness. So you admit you withdrew support? I admit I stopped allowing myself to be exploited. There's a difference. Can you elaborate on that? Not to you. Not to anyone who's already decided I'm the villain based on one carefully curated article. If you want the truth, ask Tyler how much money I've given him over 4 years. Ask Vanessa why I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving dinner. Ask Martin Caldwell why he called to threaten me with his business connections. Ask any of them why they think my only value to this family was my bank account. Jennifer Wu was writing quickly now, her earlier script forgotten. How much money did you give them? Over $200,000. I refinanced my house twice to cover their down payment and mortgage. I skipped repairs on my own home so they could live in the Pearl District. And when they told me I wasn't sophisticated enough to attend their Thanksgiving dinner, I finally realized I was being used. Do you have documentation of these payments? Every single one. Bank statements, canceled checks, mortgage documents. For years of evidence that I was generous to a fault and they were ungrateful to the point of cruelty. Would you be willing to share that documentation? I looked at this young reporter, saw the calculation in her eyes. She'd found a better story than the one she'd come here expecting. Not the heartless grandfather but the exploited elder. The wronged party who'd finally stood up for himself. I'll think about it, I said, and closed the door. Inside, my house felt different. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting, anticipating, holding its breath for whatever came next. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus. You were right. I need to respond. But I'm not writing some defensive letter to the editor. If they want to make this public, I'll give them public. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I document everything. Every payment, every disrespectful comment, every entitled demand. I'm thinking I show the world exactly what 4 years of generosity bought me. And I'm thinking I do it at Thanksgiving dinner. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's bold. And potentially very effective. but also risky. You'd be burning bridges that might not be rebuildable. The bridges are already burned. They burned them when they told me I was too rough around the edges for the Caldwells. I'm just making sure everyone knows who lit the match. How are you planning to do this? Tyler and Vanessa are hosting Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow. 12 people according to Vanessa's Facebook event. Martin and Diane Caldwell, some friends, some neighbors. All people who probably read that article and feel sorry for the poor young couple. I'm going to show up uninvited with evidence and tell the truth to everyone who'll listen. That's going to create a scene. Good. They created a scene first when they went to the media. I'm just responding in kind. Walt, are you sure about this? Once you do something like this, you can't take it back. I thought about Dorothy, about what she would do. About standing at that crosswalk 3 days ago, about Marcus's hand pulling me back from disaster. About the traps you avoid and the ones you finally acknowledge you've been living in. I'm sure, I said. It's time people knew the truth. All of it. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully in my best slacks and the sweater Dorothy had given me on our last Christmas together. My briefcase sat by the door, filled with 4 years of documentation organized into folders. Bank statements. Mortgage papers. Text messages I'd screenshotted. The newspaper article with my handwritten notes in the margins. Everything someone would need to understand the full story. Marcus had offered to come with me, but I'd declined. This was something I needed to do alone. Ruth had called twice already this morning, reminding me I could still change my mind, that public confrontation wasn't the only path forward. But it was the path I'd chosen, and I was committed to seeing it through. The drive to the Pearl District took 20 minutes. I parked across the street from Tyler and Vanessa's building and sat watching the entrance. Guests were arriving, well-dressed people carrying wine bottles and desserts, disappearing into the gleaming lobby. Through the 8th floor windows, I could see movement, the gathering already underway. I grabbed my briefcase and crossed the street. The doorman recognized me from my previous visits and waved me through without question. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, my reflection staring back at me from the polished doors. I looked older than I remembered, but steadier too. Resolved. The sounds of conversation and laughter reached me before I knocked. I could hear Martin's voice holding court about something, that practiced attorney cadence designed to command attention. I knocked firmly. 3 solid raps that cut through the noise inside. The door opened. Tyler stood there with a wine glass, his face going pale when he saw me. Walt, what are you doing here? I stepped past him into the condo. The gathering fell silent as 12 faces turned toward me. Martin and Diane on the designer couch. Vanessa frozen in the kitchen doorway. Friends and neighbors arranged around the living room, their Thanksgiving best suddenly seeming overdressed for what was about to happen. I wasn't invited to this dinner, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. But since my absence has become a matter of public interest, I thought your guests deserved to hear the full story. You need to leave, Vanessa said, her voice shaking. Right now. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the first folder. These are bank statements showing 4 years of mortgage payments. $3,200 every month. $153,600 total. I set the folder on the coffee table. Walt, please, Tyler started, but I continued. This is the paperwork from my home refinancing. $55,000 for their down payment. This is the second refinancing when they couldn't make payments. Another $43,000. I placed each folder carefully on the table like evidence in a courtroom. One of the guests, a woman in an expensive dress, leaned forward to look at the documents. Martin moved to block her view, but she'd already seen the numbers. $208,600, I said. That's what I gave them over 4 years. While they told their friends they were successful young professionals. While they posted vacation photos and restaurant check-ins. While Vanessa's parents looked down on me for being a retired electrician who wasn't sophisticated enough for their Thanksgiving table. That's not what happened, Diane said, her voice icy. "You're manipulating the narrative." I pulled out my phone and read from the screenshots I'd saved. "This is a text from Vanessa. My parents don't feel comfortable with you there. They think you're too rough around the edges for the kind of dinner we're planning." I looked up at the guests. "I'm too rough around the edges. That's what 4 years of financial support earned me." The room was completely silent now. One of the neighbors, a man I didn't recognize, was looking at Tyler with an expression somewhere between confusion and disgust. "You went to the newspapers," I continued, addressing Martin directly. "You told them I was mentally unstable. That I'd abandoned my family. You painted me as a cruel old man having a breakdown." I pulled out the printed article. "But you left out the part where you called to threaten me with your business connections. The part where you said I couldn't treat people like you and expect no consequences." Martin's face had gone red. "This is a private family matter. You made it public when you called the Willamette weak. I'm just providing context." I turned to address everyone in the room. They wanted my money but not my presence. They wanted me to fund their lifestyle but stay out of sight when it mattered. And when I finally said no, they tried to destroy my reputation rather than take responsibility for their own financial decisions. Tyler set down his wine glass with a trembling hand. "Walt, we never meant for it to go this far. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You meant for me to be so humiliated, so afraid of public shame, that I'd come crawling back with my checkbook open. You counted on me being too proud or too scared to fight back." I looked around at the assembled guests, these people who'd read the articles and believed the lies. "I'm not scared anymore. And I'm done being ashamed of standing up for myself." I closed my briefcase, leaving the evidence spread across their expensive coffee table. Anyone who wants to see the full documentation is welcome to examine it. Bank statements don't lie. Numbers don't have agendas. The truth is sitting right there for anyone who cares to look. Vanessa had tears running down her face, but they looked more like anger than remorse. "You've ruined everything. Our reputation, our friendships, our Thanksgiving. I ruined it." I almost laughed. "You invited people to dinner in a home you couldn't afford. You built a life on someone else's sacrifice and then excluded them when they became inconvenient." I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped pretending the foundation was solid. I walked toward the door. Tyler didn't try to stop me this time. At the threshold, I turned back one final time. "If anyone wants to reach me, I'm at the same address I've been at for 45 years. The house I actually own. The life I can actually afford." The elevator ride down felt lighter than the ride up. Outside, the November sun was breaking through clouds, casting long shadows across the Pearl District's perfect streets. I climbed into my truck and sat there for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain away. My phone rang. "Marcus. How did it go?" "It's done. Whatever happens next, at least the truth is out there." "How do you feel?" "Free," I said, and realized I meant it. The drive home took me through neighborhoods I knew by heart, past the river and the old buildings, back to Selwood where things were simpler and people were real. My house welcomed me with familiar creaks and the smell of Dorothy's lavender sachets still tucked into drawers. I made myself a simple dinner and ate it slowly, savoring the peace. My phone stayed quiet. No calls from Tyler or Vanessa, no threats from Martin, no reporters looking for updates. Just silence, and the knowledge that I'd done what needed doing. That evening, I received one email. From Jennifer Wu, the reporter who'd come to my door. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for your honesty yesterday. I'd like to do a follow-up story if you're willing. The truth deserves to be heard." I wrote back a simple response. The documents speak for themselves. Anyone who wants the truth can find it. I have nothing more to add. Spring came eventually, as it always does. Tyler reached out in March with a careful email. No apologies, not yet, but an acknowledgement that things had gone too far. They'd sold the condo, moved to a smaller place they could afford. Vanessa's parents were no longer speaking to them, apparently furious about the public embarrassment. I wrote back with equal care. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. When you're ready to build something real instead of something impressive, let me know. As for me, I fixed my gutters and painted my fence. I spent time with Ruth and her family. I called Marcus occasionally for coffee, grateful for the stranger who'd pulled me back for more than just a crosswalk. Sometimes the traps we avoid show us the ones we've been living in all along. And sometimes, the courage to walk away is the same as the courage to finally stand still. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.